have not watched any of his videos. This is from Grimdoc, and this is why the Emperor is a terrible dad. It's already heretical, but I think it could be funny.
Welcome to today's episode, where we'll discuss whether the traitor Primarchs were right for turning against the Imperium.
So here's my initial thought before we get into it. I'll make it really quick. So there are some instances where the Emperor, frankly, for someone who's supposed to have like 8 bazillion IQ, he played some things out horribly. Angron is like the main example of this. It's the easiest one where you're like, yeah, you totally screwed that up. You could have made something work with what you had. But all in all, even though a lot of these Primarchs did not have great lives, they had the opportunity as adults to change and just be better. So I think the onus is on both sides. Yeah, the Emperor kind of sucked in some ways, in a lot of ways, but I also think that the Primarchs, as fully grown adults that are supposed to have like at least 4 bazillion IQ, could have done on their own. Yeah, and the Angron one is just one of many examples. Like, you could argue, like, oh, with Mortarion it wasn't great. How he handled things with, like, you could get into the nitty-gritty, which we're not going to get into. Yes, I agree. Having a bad dad does not justify millions of deaths. That's my take, but we'll see what he has to say.
First, I'd like to profess that nobody is right, really.
Correct.
The Imperium sucks. The Emperor sucks. Chaos sucks. This is 40k. No one is right, and everyone sucks, including your mom. The Primarchs get a small pass,
whoa. What? Have you met my mom?
Imagine being born a godchild with a brain more powerful than a supercomputer and an ego large enough to have its own orbit. But they're still children nonetheless. You and 17 other galactic toddlers are tossed into a universe where literally no one else can relate to your divine struggle. And the one guy who could play Dad of the Century leaves for milk and never returns. Are we really surprised things went sideways? Honestly, the fact they didn't all throw tantrums that wiped out entire galaxies sooner is kind of impressive. Anyway, let's start with the Roid Rage Primarch Angron. Of all the Primarchs, you can't help but feel a little bad for the guy.
Yeah.
He was in the midst of a war, ready to die on his home world, with his gladiator family in a blaze of honor and glory. And what happens? Well, Dad pops in with the teleportation jutsu and yanks him out of there. And the kicker? Big E totally had the firepower to win the fight and save Angron's buddies, but nah. Instead, he just left his friends to die there and invalidate his whole life's work.
Yeah, this so now obviously Angron, the worst one.
Fresh off the worst case of survivor's guilt in history, is told, hey, I know you're emotionally wrecked, but could you lead this legion of space marines on some casual intergalactic genocide?
Yeah.
Thanks. For these reasons, Angron hated Big E from the start. And Angron wasn't shy about calling out the Emperor as a brutal tyrant, because, let's be real, he was completely spot on. But when you've got a piece of Dark Age tech living rent-free in your head, articulating your feelings becomes a bit tricky. Honestly, it wouldn't be shocking if Big E left that cursed thing in there on purpose.
Here's the thing, we don't know how true this is, but in The Master of Mankind, the Emperor gets Arkan Land's kind of assistance, more just like another set of eyes, just to look at Angron, but it looks like the Butcher's nails are like so entwined in his brain that removing them would just kill Angron. And basically the Emperor is like, yeah, he's just a more effective tool than like just completely losing him.
Eventual revolt, totally justified. 10 out of 10 would rebel again.
Fair.
When your mental state is already like a browser with 57 open tabs, setting the galaxy on fire feels pretty cathartic.
Yes.
Perturabo, another one of the Primarchs that desperately needed therapy. For centuries, he and his Iron Warriors were overworked employees of the Great Crusade, perpetually stuck in the most soul-crushing war zones imaginable.
And this is the part where I hop in and say, like, you can be an adult and you can say, hey, Dad, like, I know you're giving me a lot of stuff because you trust me with a lot, but, like, this is a little too much. Can I get a thank you? Or, like, can we work something out? Yeah.
Imagine a 9-to-5 job, but the boss is a god who never remembers your name. and the only perks are existential dread and grimdark PTSD. The work was thankless, the recognition non-existent. Basically, it was like being the unpaid intern of the Imperium. Purdy thought his endless campaigns were a sign that Big E didn't appreciate him. But no, it turns out the Emperor's strategy was just the classic tough love approach. A little text saying, "Good job, champ,
the thumbs
proud
up.
of you," could have gone a long way, but instead, Big E just ghosted him. The relentless grind finally took its toll on Purdy, and he snapped. His bitterness reached its grand finale.
And this is the part where it's like, you're an adult man. You could argue, oh, well, they're kind of like kids, like, depending on when the Emperor found them, but they had been alive long enough that they were, like, grown adults. And, like, you should be able to, like, talk about those things.
Where he offed his adopted sister and obliterated Olympia, his own homeworld. He thought there was no redemption, and that the Emperor would never forgive him for his failures. So, he joined good old Horus for some rebellion. Purdy's fear of failure drove him to become the galaxy's most overzealous tool, pounding away at problems as if they were all nails in need of a good bashing. Ironically, the more he banged, the more he complained about being stuck in a hammer's life. Was the Emperor a teensy bit to blame for Purdy's downfall?
The hammer.
Maybe.
It yearns to build, not just
a 34-week course in empathy and Lego building might have done wonders.
Yes.
And then we have Magnus. He was the guy who reads one Wikipedia article and suddenly thinks he's a Nobel Prize laureate. Arrogant as all hell, he strutted around like he was always the smartest dude in the room. So, when he found out about Horus's treachery, he rushed to tell Dad. But instead of sending a quick text message, he punches a hole straight through the webway and...
Well, to be fair, it still would have taken a very long time for that message to get to him. He tried.
Absolutely wrecks the Golden Throne. This webway was the equivalent of the Emperor's Lamborghini. Magnus knew he was in deep shit. Couldn't even bring himself to warn the Emperor about Horus. So he ran like a bitch. This led to the Emperor sending the Space Wolves to Prospero to escort Magnus back to Terra. Magnus, feeling extremely guilty, sends away his fleets and turns off his communications. He decides that because of his choices, his world, and his legion, the 1,000 Suns had to die. With his phone on airplane mode, Leman Russ could not reach his brother, leading him to attack the planet. In the ensuing duel, Magnus's soul is shattered. He thinks he's beyond redemption in the eyes of the Emperor and turns to chaos. Magnus is the ultimate case of you played yourself. His downfall wasn't some grand betrayal orchestrated by Big E.
It's not completely wrong.
It was his own toxic cocktail of a superiority complex and an ego. Kurz is an interesting character, to say the least. He was crazy. Like, really, really crazy. If you think your childhood was rough, imagine growing up on a planet where crime is basically a sport. Nostromo was a dystopian hellhole, even by 40k standards, which is saying a lot.
Yeah.
It was a planet of murderers, rapists, kidnappers, and thieves. Kurz had no moral compass because, well, there was literally no one to give him one. Nostromo was so vile that Kurz decided the best way to end their criminal ways was to nuke it. So that's what he did. As if growing up in a murderverse wasn't enough, Kurz had the delightful bonus of psychic visions. Not just any visions of the future either. Nope. He got to enjoy the slow burn mental torture of watching his own death, courtesy of an Imperial assassin. And who was likely sending this killer? His dear old dad, the Emperor.
Yeah.
This implied he was destined to betray the Imperium, and he believed his fate was unavoidable, and prophecies were self-fulfilling.
But that's not the case. It's not always the case. You have the possibility. You can still potentially change the future. Can.
So, he embraced it. If he's doomed to betray the Imperium anyway, might as well go full villain arc, right? Plus,
that's so
the rest
dumb.
of the Imperium always looked down upon him for the atrocities and horrors he committed.
They did commit
so
some
why not give them
terrible
a big
things.
Fuck you. It's important to note he never turned to chaos, though. Even the Big Four wouldn't touch that crazy bastard with a 10-foot pole. Did Kurz have a valid reason for betraying the Emperor? Not really. 0 out of 10.
So there are two methods you can look at when you're thinking about like prophecies, fate, and or destiny. First one is that what Kurz prescribed to is that it cannot be changed no matter what you do. So if you have that base principle then you're probably gonna do what he did, was like, doesn't matter what I do, so I might as well be the person that they say I am. Whereas on the other side of the coin, Sanguinius in this case, it's that the future is not set in stone, destiny can be changed. Didn't he have a debate with Sanguinius about that? I don't remember. I think they might have. Yeah, it's kind of all about your mentality. I personally think the future isn't set in stone. You're always capable of change, no matter how hard it is. It could be very, very difficult, but I think it is possible to change and be better. Specifically, be better. Like, don't make yourself worse. That's bad. Don't do that.
Therapist. Now we have Lorgar.
Oh,
this dude was an absolute idiot. While his brothers were out speed-running galaxy domination during the Great Crusade, Lorgar and his word-bearers were basically in slow-mo. Conquering? Nah, they were too busy remodeling temples and writing God Emperor fanfiction. Instead of leading armies, he spent his time handing out "Have you heard the word of the Emperor?" pamphlets. He was unsuited to be a general, and should have been allowed to stay home writing his philosophy books. He was a zealous, religious nerd and worshipped the Emperor, even though his dad specifically said not to do that.
Yeah,
remember,
but
Big E did not want humans worshipping any type of god, including himself.
But the Emperor overstepped, in my opinion.
Instead of a timeout, Big E decided to vaporize their home world of Monarchia as punishment.
Yeah.
Dad of the year, don't you think?
Even better, he made one of his other sons do it. Which made it like really bad, because now on top of that, you have a whole rivalry going on.
In his moment of grief and shame, Lorgar sought comfort in the absolute worst places. It made him realize something. There was a divine being worthy of his endless worship, but it wasn't Big E. Honestly, you can't even be that mad about Lorgar's betrayal. Don't force a round peg into square hole, and then be surprised when they turn into a massive a-hole. 8 out of 10 would betray again.
It's fair.
Mortarion's saga is like Angron's, but with a little more existential dread. You see, Morty spent his whole life dedicated to hating his adoptive father, the Pale King, who's basically a tyrant. He rallies a rebellion, gets all pumped up, and is on the brink of finally taking the old man down. He's close to delivering the final blow, but ultimately fails. Then the Emperor swoops in, swiping the kill. Mortarion's one reason for existing, his thirst for vengeance, is yanked away, leaving him with nothing.
But he doesn't mention, Mortarion was like close to death, I think, when this happened. You're kind of missing a key element. Yes, he stole the kill, but he also saved your life. I would feel pretty crummy about it, that like my one moment, especially in front of my dad, and I whiff. But like at the same time, he saved your life. Would you rather be dead? I think not.
He despised the Pale King, but the Emperor showed up and proved that there's always bigger fish in the sea. Mortarion had simply traded one tyrant for another. And now he was told that he's going to be one of the Emperor's 18 new overlords, tasked with crushing dissent or snuffing out anyone who dares to disagree. Mortarion's grudge isn't just about the Emperor snatching away his vengeance. It's also about the Emperor's grand hypocrisy. Then we have Fulgrim. Fulgrim wasn't necessarily wrong or right. He was just slowly corrupted by the Layer Blade, a Slaneshi demon sword on a planet that he purged.
I don't think he had any major gripes against the Emperor.
It managed to work on his inner paranoia and insecurities and turned him against his brothers and his dad.
Yes.
0 out of 10. Not Fulgrim's fault. Finally, we have the big bad wolf,
That was really short.
Horus
Yeah,
Lupercal.
accurate though.
His betrayal was twofold. One for existential reasons, and the other was a product of his upbringing. You see, Horus was literally molded by Big E to be the apex conqueror. He was designed to be the perfect warlord, but when you've conquered everything, what's left? The answer is obviously to overthrow the guy who made you in the first place.
Obviously.
He also had this creeping suspicion that after the Great Crusade, the Emperor would treat him and the other legions like the Thunder Warriors, throw them a thank you parade, and then promptly toss them into the nearest cosmic dumpster. It's hard to focus on being the War Master when you're constantly side-eyeing your own obituary. The second issue was that Horus disagreed with imperial taxes. He said, fuck the IRS. So, seeing the worlds he fought so hard to bring into the fold be forced into desperate rebellion because of totally unfair taxing regimes,
I didn't know about this.
He understandably lost it. To make things worse, the Imperium was slowly being run by bureaucratic pencil pushers who hadn't even...
I knew he was mad about the bureaucracy, but I wasn't aware about the taxes part. If anyone knows, in the comments section or whatever, VOD, or in chat, if you guys know about like the whole taxes thing, I'm kind of curious to know. I wasn't aware of that.
And fought in the wars that built the Imperium in the first place. These guys couldn't tell the difference between a lasgun and a letter opener, but thought they were fit to rule. Horus, ever the ambitious soul, looked at the Emperor's cushy throne and thought, I could do this way better. More glory, less paperwork. And, oh, yeah, fewer taxes. Definitely fewer taxes. Thanks for watching.
I can get behind fewer taxes. I can get behind that. You know, I imagine it's related to the Imperial tithe, and I think to an extent there's some stuff that they could have held off on. The Imperium needs all the resources it can get, but I feel like there should be like a grace period for the rebuilding before you start taking in the Imperial tithe. It's just a monster that needs to keep consuming and consuming, and as if you starve it, it's like when I play Total War, it's like, man, now that I finally like, oh, I have this new city, I need to milk everything I can out of it immediately so then I can repair it and get more cities. Like I totally get it.